Welcome to Open Tech Talks.tv. Today, I have a guest speaker with me, and I'm liking the way we are going to talk to this speaker because we usually have a conversation with the technologists and the people who are coming from the tech background, and we used to talk about primarily on the tech topics. And today we have Alex Shvartsman with us. And he's a writer, translator, an anthologist from Brooklyn, and he's an author of so many books. And I want to welcome him to the Open Tech Talks.tv. And we will hear from Alex how he's writing books and how the bridge is coming between now the artificial intelligence and all going on. So, Alex, welcome to the show.
Hi, and thank you very much for having me. So, as you pointed out in your introduction, I'm not a tech guy, so it's going to be very different for your audience. I am a writer of science fiction and fantasy. I'm very used to thinking about how technology is going to change our world in the near future. I've written many short stories for magazines like Nature and Analog and other similar publications. And so, of course, artificial intelligence is kind of the holy grail of science fiction and has been on my mind both as a writer and as an anthologist. It hit the creative industry a lot
Mhm.
more, perhaps, than many others, because while all of us imagined the future where the robots would, sweep our streets and cook our meals and do all these menial tasks, while the rest of us sat around and composed poems and drew paintings. In fact, what we're seeing with Midjourney and ChatGPT and similar large language models is those things are attempting to compose poems and create paintings, while people are afraid that they will lose their job and be
Right.
end up cooking the meals and doing the menial labor. And so when ChatGPT first, actually Midjourney really was the first one that
Right.
kind of hit it big in our industry. When it became a really big deal among the creatives, I set
Mhm.
out to create an anthology called The
Mhm.
Digital Estate, where popular science fiction writers across the
Mhm.
globe get to talk about how they envision the future where artificial minds have true intelligence and are
Mhm.
able, how will they then interact with art? So this is not
Mhm.
large language models like we have now, but actual AIs capable of intelligent thought. And
Right.
it's been a fascinating project because I was surprised at how different and how many angles these writers came from when discussing this. There are stories, of course, that are very dark and gloomy and predict a terrible future, but there were
Right.
equally as many stories that see this possible utopia that the new technology will usher in.
Right. Great. So as you started a conversation with Midjourney and ChatGPT, and you link the conversation with the creative writers. So as a maybe a writer, what comes in your mind when you say, okay, uh, being a tech guy who used to write a tech blogs or tech articles, but now I started feeling it with the arrival of ChatGPT that I can write a book or I can write any fiction or maybe a novel. You rightly said. And even my 6 year old kid, he was talking to me, you know, can we ask ChatGPT to write for me a story which he want to present it to school? So how you as an author can explain or maybe give some context to it?
So there is this really pervasive idea that the
Mhm.
current generation of LLMs is
Mhm.
capable of producing publishable fiction. I
Mhm.
can, with absolute certainty, tell you that currently it cannot. Currently,
Mhm.
it is capable of writing, like your kid asked you to, of writing an essay for school, perhaps at middle school level. but it is absolutely not capable of producing publishable fiction.
Mhm.
It's just you can absolutely know when you're reading the text. You can
Mhm.
absolutely know from like the sort of the bland verbiage and turns of phrase and kind of how it's mashing things together. You can absolutely tell that there is no person behind it. There's no soul behind it. It's being regurgitated by an algorithm and sped
Mhm.
out. Having said that, this is today. There's no
Right.
guarantee that we're going to be in the same place 5 years from now, 10 years from now, or
True.
even sooner. When we saw the first video games, they were, they had no real graphics. It was things like
Right.
Pong and
Right.
Snake, and we went from that to video game characters that look like real people within a couple of decades.
Mhm.
So it is absolutely possible and certainly problematic for those of us who work in the creative field that
Mhm.
this is the future that we might be facing long before we have to retire. But we're not there yet. Right
Mhm.
now, I can tell you that not even creative translation, technical
Mhm.
translation, these bots are actually pretty good at it. If you need to
Mhm.
ask directions, if you need to understand the gist of an article that's posted in another language on the website, it's
Mhm.
perfectly good enough. If you
Mhm.
want to read a book, if you want to enjoy, I'm not even talking about poetry, but if you want to
Right.
read
Right.
a work of fiction, right,
Mhm.
and you want to enjoy it the way that, you want to enjoy the beautiful language, of the author, you will
Mhm.
need a human translator that is optimally as good or better a writer as the original author,
Mhm.
which is not always possible, but we can come
Right.
kind of close sometimes.
True.
I don't feel like my job is in danger in that regard right now as a translator.
Mhm.
Having said that, uh, all the technical translators are in trouble. Duolingo, just the other day, the news broke that they laid off something like 50% of their freelancers who they were using to create and test the translations. And the
Mhm.
remaining staff will basically, double check to make sure that the automated translation is correct.
Mhm.
So we
Mhm.
are definitely seeing that loss of jobs and the kind of change that we see with any new technological iteration.
Right. And I echo your feedback that the creative writer or the way that these LLMs are writing it. For example, now over a year, right? So when in my professional life, when someone send an email and that email is written in a very language where I mean my mind started recognizing it. This is not written by this guy or this person. It's written by I think he used the large language models to get the text. And even if you start seeing the LinkedIn, so you started making a pattern that okay, yeah, this is written by someone personally, and this is no, this is look like a very straight sentences. So it's mean it got helped through the models. So you rightly said, and maybe I'm wrong that it is not used, but there are some points started coming in mind when you read it, and I'm not the expert on that.
No, you're absolutely right. Especially if it's somebody that you've been communicating with, a friend, a colleague, somebody that you've been communicating with via email for a long time, and suddenly the way that they're writing their email is changing a little bit. And it's so easy to do now. If you use a Google product like Gmail,
Right.
that's just automatically cooked in. And maybe
True.
there's a way to opt out. I haven't really looked, but by default, they will automatically, as you're typing an email, they will suggest the next few words to type. So you can just press tab and save yourself half a second of your life.
Mm-hmm.
And that's perfectly fine. I think that that's exactly the kind of usage that we want from the
Right.
software. If we need to write a strongly worded letter requesting a refund from a company, that's not fun. Nobody wants to do that.
True. True.
And it's formulaic enough where a chatbot can write that for you, and then you can just kind of glance over it and fix it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But it's so different from writing, from creative writing. It's so different from when you're trying to do something with that language to make it feel alive.
Mm-hmm.
And the bots just can't quite do that right now because all they're doing is taking existing material and mashing it together into this, they're making these mashed potatoes out of the buds, and they're
Right.
trying to make them as consistent and as sort of like rep- blandly representative of what has come before as they possibly can. Now, there are
Right.
tricks. There are prompts that you can give it to make the voice sound a little bit more unique. But the only
Mm-hmm.
way to really do that is by asking it to emulate existing authors. So the voice will not so much be unique as it will try to copy whoever, Dr. Seuss, Stephen King, whoever it is
Mm-hmm.
that you like. They're not going to be perfect at it, but they will sound a little bit less bland that way. But
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to get this robot to be the next Stephen King, because the next
Mm-hmm.
Stephen King will be somebody who has that unique voice that you, as a human, when you read that text, you immediately connect with it on a deeper level in the way that you're not connecting with these emails now, that you're kind of sensing, oh, something is not quite right. There's no human soul and human thought behind this.
Right. True. True. Okay. So now, as like you mentioned about the creative writing, and with the influx of these models are coming, and they are in early stage, but they will get more the way we see it. Like you gave an example of games and all that. So how do you see then, as we humans are need to treat that one, or maybe need to be worried about it, or what should we be doing it?
So this is a really complicated question, and it depends on your role and how it's going to affect you and your family and your loved ones personally. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
we are seeing this technology has
Mm-hmm.
the potential to upheave our society and the way that we interact and do things, even
Mm-hmm.
more than the advent of the internet in the early
Right.
90s, right? I
Right.
mean, think about it. Think about how much things have changed, how we do our shopping, which is almost all
Mm-hmm.
online. The malls are
Mm-hmm.
gone. People who worked in those malls had to find new jobs and be retrained. But the
Mm-hmm.
economic opportunity that that technology has created has
Mm-hmm.
created more jobs, not less. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
when Photoshop, so there's the Photoshop software, when that first was introduced, there was a very similar upheaval among the artists and among people who create, like, who do graphics design, saying that they
Mm-hmm.
will all be out of the job and how terrible this is going to be and how this software is going to replace them and what
Right.
woe is me. In
Mm-hmm.
reality, there are more opportunities for graphic designers today than
Mm-hmm.
there was the day before Photoshop was introduced. More people are making a living doing graphics design, but
Mm-hmm.
they are all using Photoshop, and Photoshop is a very complicated software, and to use it well, you need that level of training and expertise that they bring.
Mm-hmm.
So I suspect that we're going to see something similar with a lot of the creative endeavors where it's going to be professionals that are using tools like Midjourney, tools like ChatGPT, etc., as opposed to a layperson who can still use it. I mean, I'm terrible at graphics design, but I can use Photoshop to make a quick banner or something that I
Right.
probably wouldn't be able to before its advent, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I
Mm-hmm.
can't do it nearly as well as a professional graphics designer.
Mm-hmm.
So the pain that we're experiencing is temporary,
Right.
but nevertheless, it will truly affect the number of people who are not necessarily trained to do other jobs and or who don't want to lose their comfortable well-paying job because of the new technology. So
Right.
of course they're against that very much, but then as a society, the net benefit is most likely in the long term going to outweigh the negatives.
Mm-hmm. Right. Now, maybe let's hear how Alex started writing.
So I actually came to writing fairly late in life. I was born in the Soviet Union, and my first
Mm-hmm.
language was Russian. My second language was
Right.
Ukrainian, and I did not
Mm-hmm.
learn to speak English until my family moved to the United States around 1990.
Right.
So I never thought that my English would be good enough to write fiction,
Mm.
especially at a professional level. And I waited
Right.
a long time. I waited until I was well into my 30s before I started writing,
Mm-hmm.
because I've been a lifelong science fiction fan. I've
Right.
devoured science fiction books. I mean, I've read
Mm-hmm.
all the classics. I kept up with the
Mm-hmm.
current books. I would be the guy who would, once a week or once every 2 weeks, would go to a large bookstore and spend a couple of hours just perusing the shelves, find
Mm-hmm.
a bunch of interesting books, buying one of each, and then if I started reading a book and loved it enough, I would go on Amazon or somewhere, order everything by that
Mhm.
author. By the time I finished that book, I would have their other material to continue
Right.
reading. So I was just a very active consumer of fiction, but
Mhm.
I always wanted to tell stories of my own. And so finally, I overcame the fear of trying to be creative in my third language. And I
Mhm.
found that it wasn't such an impediment. I was able to, I mean, yes, there's still occasional things that I will get wrong grammatically or misspell, but there are
Mhm.
minor issues that are easily solved with a copywriter, copy editor.
Right.
And so I started writing short stories and getting them out to magazines. And that
Mhm.
um, kind of slowly grew into what has become a second career for me, where
Mhm.
I now have several published novels, two short story collections, an award, a couple of award nominations, and
Mhm.
many, many. So the bookshelves you see behind me, half of that
Mhm.
is are books that include some of my own writing, whether as an editor,
Right.
a short story that's part of the anthology, etc. So I've been at it for over 10 years now, and I very much enjoy having this creative outlet. So for
Mhm.
me, I'm not quite as concerned perhaps as some other writers because it's never been about becoming a primary source of income for me. It's always
Mhm.
been the way that people primarily wrote back in the 19th century. Almost nobody was a
Mhm.
professional writer. People who had
Mhm.
the means and the opportunity would write on the side because they loved it and they were able to. So I feel like I'm in a very privileged position to be among those that I can continue to write and create. Regardless of what happens technologically. But
Mhm.
unfortunately, many very talented people are not in the same boat and maybe more adversely affected than me.
Mhm. Okay. So maybe if someone is listening in our audience, maybe in different career stages or on the age wise, or maybe he want to give some advice to his or her kids, and being if you talk about schools, and then they always say, please push kids to read books, and that will increase their vocabulary and the reading habits. So being you as a writer, what are your suggestions and your tips for maybe your parents, or maybe someone want to start writing for them, for him or her? What could be your tips that if I need to start writing tomorrow, I need to write something, so what should I be doing, or what should I be following up? Some recipe.
So creative writing is not going away. Whether or
Mhm.
not it will remain a source of income, whether or not it will change because of technology, AI,
Mhm.
or other changes that are coming up,
Mhm.
we are
Mhm.
still going to need in almost any job, unless your job is going to be a street sweep. In
Mhm.
almost any job, we need to be able to express ourselves on paper
Mhm.
or
Right.
on the computer screen these days.
Right.
So absolutely, it's something that we need to teach our children, and we need to get better as adults.
Mhm.
First thing is writing, right? You need to be able to like find a way to clearly express yourself, in written form, and that is
Mhm.
achieved by practice. That is achieved by taking classes if you need them. Mostly, though, the more you actually do it, the more
Mhm.
the more you're going to feel comfort at ease and be able to express yourself better on the page. So practice, practice, practice. Now, the
Mhm.
second part of that is once you want to make that leap from general writing to creative writing, to trying to write short stories, poems,
Mhm.
novels, whatever it is,
Mhm.
that there, in many ways, there's once you have that skill of being able to express yourself, it gives you a huge leg up. And it's probably the reason why I started getting published fairly quickly. A lot of people spend, 5 years, 10 years writing into their desk before they write material that's publishable. If
Mhm.
you're good at writing nonfiction, just general creative writing that you learned in school, you will
Mhm.
get to that publishable stage much more quickly. But at
Mhm.
that point, there's a different skill set, and again, it's achievable through practice and through learning. There's there are so many resources that are easily accessible these days because they're
Mhm.
online. There are
Mhm.
workshops, there are critique groups,
Mhm.
and depending on the genre, that the person
Mhm.
wants to write in, depending on what sort of stories they want to tell. There are a lot of learning materials, but what I find is that the most common mistake people who want to write a book, and they say they
Mhm.
want to write a book, make, is they
Mhm.
think that the most valuable part of the book is their idea. And I have
Mhm.
really rude awakening news for those people. Ideas are cheap. Every single writer has more ideas than they will be able to write in their lifetimes, and new ideas
Mhm.
come to their head constantly.
Mhm.
uh, Idea on its own has almost no merit. People who approach writers at conferences and say, I have a great idea, you write the book and we'll split the profits. We make
Mhm.
jokes about those people. We just laugh at them because we
Mhm.
all have more ideas than we can use.
True.
The hard part is taking that idea and spending 6 months, a year, sometimes 2 years, actually shaping it into a story, creating a
Mhm.
plot, creating characters that are not two-dimensional, telling that
Mhm.
story, writing a book. It's hard work.
Mhm.
I
Right.
tend to write, maybe 500 words a day. There will
Mhm.
be days where I'll write nothing. I'll sit down at the screen. I kind of like stare at it for 10 minutes and move on to do something else because nothing is coming.
Mhm.
And then
True.
there'll be really good days where I'll write maybe 2,000 words. And
Mhm.
to give you an idea, an average novel is closer to 100,000 words. And
Mhm.
when I give you these numbers, that's just writing the first draft. When you finish the first draft, your book is far from done. You will rewrite and revisit and edit this book for months after you finish the first draft.
Mhm.
Then you will take this manuscript that you feel is ready, and you will try to you'll send out queries to try to find an agent, which can take a couple of years. If
Mhm.
you're lucky enough to find representation, the agent may ask you to revise the novel, so you will do more work. And then when the agent is satisfied, the agent will send that novel out to publisher, which is another process which could take years again. An
Mhm.
interested publisher may ask for further revisions. So
Mhm.
you better love the book that you're working on because you will read it more times than anybody else ever. Uh,
Right.
so that's the difficult part, and I don't want to make it sound like nobody should get into writing. I absolutely love the process. I love being able to create something out of nothing,
Mhm.
and it's fascinating. It's absolutely fabulous. But
Mhm.
people who want to get into this need to realize that
Mhm.
it is really hard work. Most people who start writing a novel never finish.
Mhm.
Most people who say they will start writing a novel never start. So if
Right.
you actually sit down and you set yourself a daily goal, even if that goal is 250 words, and you
Mhm.
actually sit down and you write every single day, by the end of the year, you will have a messy, terrible, but complete first draft, and you will be ahead of 99% of the people who have writing aspirations.
Mhm. All right. Now, maybe one linking question coming to my mind with the new ways of writing and this you read a lot of self-publishing and these internet type of writing influencer, and then they take a 1 month 2 month to quickly write on some topic and then push it to Amazon and all that. So it's like that school of thought is also there, that okay, that they present it like writing is not an issue at all. It's like just you need to put together some words like 10,000 words or 15,000 words and then your book is ready.
Yes, and the people who are selling you those services, they're making money selling you those services. So let's
True.
remember that. It's the same people who tell you that, all those ads that say, work from home, make $10,000 a month working from home or whatever it is. These are the
True.
same people. You should not listen to them. It is absolutely not true. Yes, it's become easier than ever to self-publish. You no
Mhm.
longer need a tremendous investment. You no longer need a big publisher to get your books
Mhm.
out to the readers. Having
Mhm.
said that, tens of thousands of new books launch on Amazon every single day. Just because you can get your, whatever you wrote, those 10, 15,000 words that you wrote, just because you can format them in an ebook file and put them up on Amazon, doesn't
Mhm.
mean that anybody will ever read it. In fact,
Right.
most of the books that are launched on Amazon are not even ever downloaded by even 100 people. And
Mhm.
100 people is a good number for some of them, by the way. Like sometimes the
Yeah.
number will be five, or 10 or
Mm-hmm.
however many relatives the author has that he can convince to do it. So the
Mm-hmm.
problem there is not so much the technological problem of getting the book published. The
Mm-hmm.
problem is getting the book published in a way that will make anybody care. And so, yes,
Right.
you can absolutely succeed as a self-published writer, but you
Mm-hmm.
still need to go on podcasts like this to talk about your book. You need
True.
to appear on TV or on popular blogs, or
Mm-hmm.
somewhere where you can reach potential readers, and they will hear you and say, "Hey, that person is interesting. I wonder what their book is like." Now, a
Mm-hmm.
publisher will do a lion's share of that work for you. But these
Mm-hmm.
days, even like, so I'm with traditional publishers for my books. I'm not self-publishing most of my books, and I still have to do a lot of the promotion on my own because the publisher's resources are limited, and
Right.
it's not an industry that has like billions of VC money being pumped the way the tech industry is. So we are
True.
usually left on our own to kind of like dance around and go, buy my book, buy my book.
True.
But yeah, you can absolutely, there are success stories, right? There are people whose book went viral on TikTok, and after
Mm-hmm.
nobody buying it for 10 years, suddenly like tens of thousands of people pick up a copy. But those
Mm-hmm.
examples are extremely seldom. They're very rare.
So.
And most of us have to work hard and build our audience. We go on social media. We
Mm-hmm.
attend conventions. So there are, for example, for me in the science fiction and fantasy field, there are a
Right.
number of conventions that range from something like New York Comic Con or San Diego Comic
Mm-hmm.
Con, which are huge, sprawling conventions with like tens or hundreds of thousands of people,
Mm-hmm.
down to very small literary conventions that may only have 500 people. But all of those 500 people are avid readers that buy lots and lots and lots of books and tell their
True.
friends. So you go
True.
to both and you build your audience a few readers at a time.
Great, great. Thank you so much for sharing the tip. So maybe now going back to the way we conversation started, I think before we conclude our today's discussion on the very hot topic of AI, and everybody is being impacted on it. And you categorically said that the creative writers are not gonna get impacted on the AI,
In the near
but
future.
in the near future. But is it we can say, okay, are the AI is started helping the creative writer or not yet?
Not yet. There
Not yet.
are so the
Mm.
problem that, and I actually wrote about it extensively in the foreword to the
Okay.
digital estate. A lot of the time, people think that they can use ChatGPT and Bard and similar chatbots to do their
Mm.
research for their books instead of going to
Yes.
Wikipedia. And I'm not talking about deep level research either. I'm not
Yeah.
talking
Yeah.
about going
Yeah.
into the library and pulling up archives
True.
from 200 years ago. Just very basic level research.
Mm.
The
Mm.
problem with these models is that they're designed to give you the answer that sounds most likely to be correct instead of
Mm.
an answer that's actually factually correct. So I
Mm.
asked when I was preparing the manuscript for publication for this book, and
Mm.
I needed to write my bio. I
Mm.
asked ChatGPT and Bard to. I asked them, "Who is Alex Shvartsman? What is his? Can you write his bio for me?" And
Mm.
each of them wrote bios that, to somebody who doesn't know me, sound like they could be very accurate. But
Mm.
they completely made up things that were just not true.
Mm.
They said that I was nominated for awards that I was never nominated for. One of them said that I graduated from the University of Pennsylvania, which I've never even visited. Uh,
Mm.
and so all of these errors were included in there. So when
Mm.
you are writing a book and you
Mm.
need to find out, you're writing a western, and you go, well, what kind of weapons other than the shotguns and the peacemaker revolvers or whatever? What did they use that wasn't, did they use knives? Did they use axes?
Mm. Mm.
What did they use
Mm.
that wasn't a firearm?
True.
This is something that I actually had to recently look up for something I was writing. So I'm using a
Mm.
real life example here. If
Right.
you ask a chatbot, it will hallucinate an answer, and that answer might not be accurate. And then when you publish your book, all your readers will go like, "Hey, wait a minute, that's just not true." Anybody
Mm.
who knows a little more than you do about the subject. So right now,
Mm.
they're not good enough to use for research purposes at all. And
Mm,
as far as helping you write, that is definitely not a good idea because again, it'll be very, very obvious. So we actually had a scandal in our industry. So not so much a scandal, but like kind of a problematic situation where
right.
one of the most
Mm,
popular science fiction magazines, a magazine called
mm,
Arts World, was
mhm,
inundated with AI generated submissions because they're paying a pretty good rate. So these people kind of felt like, hey, I can just give the bot an idea, have it generate a story, and maybe I'll get these people to pay out $1,000 or so for my
right.
story. And of course, what it did is it gummed up the works because a human being is reading all of these submissions. And so when the number of submissions suddenly increases exponentially, but they're all AI generated garbage, uh, what it's doing is it's preventing them from reading something that's potentially publishable.
Potentially
But
published.
they can
True.
also, and I've spoken to many other editors, plus my
Mm,
personal experience as well, and we can all tell you that at this stage, at least, it is very, very obvious when we're reading work that's been created or mostly written by a bot. And school teachers can probably tell you that as well. Though for them, it's a little bit more difficult, right? Because they're evaluating the writing of kids who are
right.
not very good at writing, whereas we as
True.
editors are evaluating the writing of people who are either at a professional or semi-professional level looking to get their work published. So
Mm,
the gap in quality between what it should be and what the machines are producing at
mm.
the moment is still very large. So I would
All right.
say we're not at the point where the best way chatbots can help you right now are a myriad ways in which they're actually useful, like in writing code, in doing things, in writing those, like a hey, somebody I wrote an article for owes me money, and I need to send them a demand for payment.
True.
And a bot can write a pretty good demand for payment for you, and
Good.
something that you would not enjoy writing yourself, right?
Good. True.
So
True.
that's the way that they can help. But actual creative process, not yet.
True. Thank you so much. And before we conclude today's session, so your most recent book, which you are referring to, Digital Estate, what it covers? Maybe if you can give some idea to the listeners that.
So we gathered short stories by some of the most prominent writers in science fiction and fantasy, and these are not just writers from the United States and UK. We have stories from places like Ukraine and Madagascar, and
Mm,
South America, a number of other countries in Europe. So this is several stories from China, story from
mm,
Japan. So from all over the world, and all of these writers are imagining scenarios of how an artificial mind would interact with, with art. And when I say art, it doesn't necessarily have to be painting
right.
or creative writing. It could be sculpture. It could be theater. There are all sorts of different types
Mm,
of art. Another
mm,
really interesting thing that we did with this project is people who don't want to or can't afford to buy the book can still read it for free. If you go
mm,
to future-sf.com,
mhm,
we are publishing one story a week until the entire book is available for people to read online for free. So if
mm,
you're able
great.
to support us, please buy the paperback, buy the ebook, whatever
Mm,
format you like to read the books in. They're not very expensive. But if you can't, we still want the readers to be able to enjoy and appreciate these stories. And so there are, I believe that according to the schedule, by the end of February, the entire book will be posted up on the website.
all right. Thank you so much, Alex, for joining and sharing your thoughts on the AI space, which is right now where we are excited and we are also having some apprehensions that okay, what's going to happen with all those, and how the universities, colleges, schools are going to take it up, or even how we are going to treat that one to interact with AI. Sharing. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.